All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LaviCast. I'm your host, Lavi Ray, and I'm here with my special co host, Ian Waffles.
Hi, thanks for having me back again.
And today, we get to talk about something good for once.
Absolutely.
Yes. So,
What is it?
many of you might be familiar with this franchise called Power Rangers, and we are going to be looking at something that is more or less we'll call it the parent series, the parent franchise for it. And we're looking at its newest interpretation called Avataro Sentai Donbrothers. Myself and Ian have just watched it over the past year, and we're here to talk about our thoughts about it. So, myself, I have been basically a Power Rangers fan since I was like 4, but I kind of fell out of it when I was a teenager. But I ended up coming back into it around 2011 with Super Sentai with Gokaiger with it, which is what I believe most Western people who are into Super Sentai now were able to jump into it. Basically, think One Piece as Power Rangers, but they get to transform into all the past Power Rangers on top of that. And I've been watching that ever since. However, I was able to show a couple of trailers to Ian here to as like a guess just for a little fun to show like isn't this insane, and well, he apparently liked it.
Yes, I loved it, which I was surprised.
So we both ended up spending the past year just kind of getting a chance to like just watch it and just like experience all that is Dawn Brothers, and we're here to just go ahead and talk about it. So Ian, why don't you go ahead and just start with your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so going in, you had shown me a bunch of different clips from other ones before, and so obviously I knew it was kind of over the top, campy, and like a lot of dumb fun. And if there's something I love, it's dumb fun. And so with a lot of heart, that's my whole thing with Kingdom Hearts and why I love it. So I was like, you know what? Uh, Once you had told me like a new one has started, because it's kind of daunting to like jump into one of these when they have like 50 episodes or whatever.
Yeah.
So when you had said someone was starting, it felt a little less like pressure, where it's like, oh, you just kind of watch one as they come out, and so you don't always have like a big looming list coming out. It's kind of passively coming to you. So I was like, you know
Yes.
what, this if there's any chance to get into it, this would be now. So and obviously I'd been talking to you for years, so I'm like, you know what, I'll see what he enjoys too, because I talk to you about stuff I enjoy all the time. So I ended up watching it, and I was not expecting It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but they're Power Rangers, and it was pretty incredible from beginning to end. Just watching these insane asshole good guys slowly become just like good people, and also just kind of get their shit together and their lives together, all while being like campy, silly fun, and like having a ton of heart and like just like insanity. And I just remember asking you, I was like, are they normally like this? Are they normally this weird? And you were like, this is a bit much even for them.
Yes. To be clear, Dawn Brothers, Sentai for the most part, especially when it comes to their main cast, and I'll just say this as for all tokusatsu, they do tend to be on the weird side, but this is insane even by those standards, which I fucking love, and I am really hoping that the next season is going to match that. Like this series featured a character or the main character, Momoi Taro, who said, who after dying and came back to life, said, "I have no ties to heaven or hell, so that makes me immortal, bitch." And I'm like, yes. And I bring him up in particular because next season looks like we're gonna have 5 of him, and I'm genuinely curious how all of them are going to work off each other before killing one another. So I'm looking forward to that. But let's focus on this season in particular. So I'm going to read the Wikipedia article for the Wikipedia premise, just so we can just keep everything on, just keep
Yeah.
everyone up to date. So, a man called Jin Momoi finds a baby inside of a peach-shaped capsule, who he names Taro and raises. 21 years later, mysterious monsters called the Hitotsuki begin appearing when humans overcome when humans overcome with their inner desires, are taken over by spirits infused with the powers related to the past Power Rangers. Taro and 4 other individuals selected by Jin: Senichi Sadahara, a smart but eccentric young man; Haruka Kito, a high schooler manga artist, Tsubasa Inuzuka, a wanted fugitive, and Tsuyoshi Kijino, an ordinary salesman, begin fighting with the Hototsuki and saving their hosts as the Donbrothers.
And I think what's so fun about that kind of introduction to him is that most of them are like fucking lies.
Yes. Because that premise kind of seemed like, oh yeah, it's about like this one weird guy with one kind of weird guy with these four surely normal people as they become superheroes. No, the actual premise is that we get to see 12 psychopaths try to drive each other crazy. And it's great. Because we have at the more or less by the halfway mark, we have our 5 Rangers, who we have the red who's a psychopath, yellow who's a narcissist, blue who is a fucking hippie who's allergic to who is physically allergic to money. Our Black Ranger who is who's into puppy play, and Pink who is such a fucking simp that he drives back around and becomes a murderous psychopath who I am not exaggerating here, gets a man killed for looking at his wife wrong, and it is great.
And he becomes a monster multiple times.
Yes, because in this series, the monsters, the Hototsuki, are actually just humans who have just been, like the premise said, are taken over by spirits,
based on their like negative emotions,
right? And Kijino, due to him being so obsessive about his wife, ends up getting turned into a monster 3 times, of course, the series. 4 if we count the stage play.
Right.
So we got those 5, but then we have our 6th Ranger who has literally multiple personality disorder and has 2 different people inside of himself.
Yeah, and actively like tries to kill the entire team in both personalities. When he first meets them, he's like, you guys kind of suck as like Momo Itaro's like sidekicks, and you kind of like let him down that one time. I think the only way you could and he says this very casually. He's like, I think the only way you could redeem yourself is if like I execute you right now.
Yep.
And this is when he's normal. Like this is when he's not as like a little demon boy who has slick back hair.
Oh, and he magically just grows a cape and eyeliner.
Yeah, and eyeliner. And he's also literally seeing things and has an imaginary girlfriend.
We're going to build up to that. Let's build up to that.
Okay.
Then we have our quote unquote rivals for the series. We have who are all named after numbers. We have Sonoi, Sononi, and Sonoza. So we have the classic edge boy rival who's desperate to try to find the beauty in the world, which he finds. Spoilers. We have Sononi, whose whole thing is about trying to find what true love actually is, and is going around dealing with a bunch of fuckboys to try to figure out what they are. And when they end up letting her down, she just either flicks them off or turns them into monsters.
Yeah,
and then we have and then we have Sonoza, who is someone who's trying to understand what emotions are, and his idea to find out what emotions are is walking up to random people and saying, "Hey, is this how you laugh?"
and then going back to like a stone cold face. And then everyone's just very weirded out. His other way of learning this is to kidnap a manga author who wrote a story he likes and be like, all right, make more manga that I like so I can learn emotions.
And so those are our, I want to say rivals. I really rivals, maybe antagonists. I don't really want to call them villains.
They kind of become all roles in the series.
Yeah,
like they start off as antagonists and they become rivals, and then by the end they're so
yeah. Then we have then we have Kaito Zenkai, who is meant to be I don't know how to describe them. Basically, in the show, their main base of operations is a cafe. In the middle of the city that's run by this man named Goshikita, who also can turn into a Power Ranger called Zen Kaiser Black. And the funny thing about him is that he was technically the equivalent of the Red Ranger in the past season, but he's just here with the exact opposite personality, from being like the bubbly good boy in the past season to now just stone faced, cold, and serious. And they never explain how we get from one to the other. Like,
yeah, I love that they never actually tell you who he is. Like eventually, like they just ask her, like, "Who the fuck are you?" And he's like, "I'm very special."
Yep.
And they never explain it, and I'm glad.
And they shouldn't. I'm going to get to why about that later when we talk about. Let's talk about when we get to talk about the child series, because I do want to have a little mini rant about that in a sec. But those are basically our main players. Oh, and let's not forget Pink's wife. So Pink has turned into a monster basically 4 times because of this woman. So it's like, she's really special. And she's like, well, on the surface, she kind of is. Her whole thing is she's trying to be supportive of her husband, really just like tries to help him out with his own insecurities and tries to encourage him as much as possible. But of course, she's even more special because actually she's a fucking monster in the series. Not a Totsuki, but something called a bestial, which was
another faction.
Yes. Like that's another faction within another faction, basically, where her whole thing is that she's pretending to be this woman who was originally the Black Ranger's fiance and is now pretending to be another woman and married Kijino so she can try to basically live out the dreams of the other woman. And because of this, she's kind of more or less I never really officially knew if she was doing this intentionally or not, but due to some of the wording, it seems like she was intentionally trying to drive him insane. Yeah. Or was at least up for doing it at a particular point. So that's all. That was also a factor of the story. So we have all of those. So that's like what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, all 12 of those psychopaths. And by the end of the series, I think we can go ahead and properly say Pink's wife won when it came to driving someone else crazy, because no one else because I think Momotaro and Haruka, the Yellow Ranger, are the only other 2 people who turn people into those monsters. But I think they only got to like 2 or 3. She's the only one who was able to turn someone into a monster 4 times.
Yeah. So she did pretty well.
Yes. Good.
And by the way, when we say like they're psychopaths, like what we mean is that they're all like very selfish in different ways. Mm-hmm. And what that allows for is like, because the show is very over the top. So yes. Like I think the best scene to kind of like describe this is like there's one where one of the characters is like they're like in a hostage situation. Like the one who's a criminal, he like grabs the Yellow Ranger or the Yellow Sister. Yes. And like brings her into like this little building or whatever, just to like have like a little leverage. And then he's like, I'm not gonna hurt you. I just need like you to be right here so that I can like get away. But then the yellow person, what's her name?
Haruka.
Haruka. Yeah, she decides, she's like, wait a second. Being a hostage might make like she like thinks that he, I think 1, likes her, and 2, she's like, oh, this could be really good for my manga. So she like decides, no, you have to keep me a hostage. And then she sees the pink one, Kijino, outside, and she kidnaps him because he's like walking by, and she's like, get in here, we got to do something. And so like they're just all like very selfishly minded. And the story plays this up to pretty much 11. And it's just always really, really fun. Now, they're not like, none of them are, I would say, cruel. Like, they're all heroes, but they're heroes in a very manic way, you know? Yes. And it's as the series goes on that they kind of, especially by the end, that they actually fully appreciate the fact that they're heroes. In fact, there's a whole episode literally about like them. They're like, we're going to reveal we're the Donbrothers. And like the whole episode is them just all getting like really long noses, because they're just all getting like so hyped about like how famous they're gonna be.
Right.
And then
Oh,
by the end, you think, oh, the master talks them out of it, but it turns out he decides he's going to take all the credit himself. So even the most stoic character is actually a selfish asshole as well.
and then after that he ends up making a whole book series just about his photo sets and what it means to be a hero, and decides to try to sell it. And tries to sell multiple copies and multiple versions of this book, talking about how great of a hero he is.
Yeah, even though he doesn't do shit.
No, yeah, that's the best part. He shows up for like 3 different fights and never does anything to actually help out.
Yeah. So yeah, just stuff like that. Or the main character, like the way in which he is selfish and grows from it is that he is just very like he's perfect.
Yes.
He's like perfect at fighting. He is perfect at like doing tasks. But like every time he does anything, like let's say he eats your food, he won't just like eat it or like be cordial with you. He will rate it. And so he'll say like, oh, this is 50 points. It's shit. Like, do better.
Or 25 points or 15 points.
Yeah, it's 15 points. But then what makes him likable is that then he'll like help you figure out how to make it better. But he's so blunt about it. He has no tact or like idea for people's emotions, that when he was a child, he literally just walked around his neighborhood and he's like, hey, you're fat, you need to lose some weight. Hey, your garden's gonna die because you're not feeding it properly. Hey, blah blah blah. And so when he has a birthday party, nobody comes to it, and his surrogate father just has to lie and say everyone was busy.
No, it's even more extreme than that. It's so bad. He's so bad at doing this that not only were people protesting outside of his house saying that he needs to move the fuck out, they all end up moving out, and the entire apartment complex is just with him and his father. Everyone else moves.
Yeah, because he's such an obnoxious little brat. So it's great. Like that's the kind of thing we're dealing with, where it's like none of these characters are like mean. They're just all very eccentric.
Yes.
And like that's what makes it like endearing. Because I could see some people being like, well, that doesn't sound fun, you know. To see like a bunch of like people just being mean to each other. It's like, no, they're not mean. They're just all very eccentric.
Yeah, like they're not like, besides Pink, and we'll get to him because I want to have a particular part about him. No one in the series is like sadistic or like actively looking to make someone suffer. Like, in fact, the two guys that you see on this thumbnail, that you see on the thumbnail for this video, the one in red is our Red Ranger, and the one in blue, that is Sonoi. He's the leader of the rival team for this series. And these two, from pretty much episode 1, have a huge rivalry about them wanting to like defeat the other and take the other down. But throughout the entire, but like for the first handful of episodes, they don't know what they look like outside of their suits. And for the first time they end up meeting, they basically end up establishing a really touching romantic relationship between the two. Like, they don't like outright try to say like they're in love, but they end up constantly talking to each other, trying to console one another, even to the point of almost asking each other out on a date once they're done with their fights. And even to the point of talking about how beautiful the moon is, moon is as they're talking to each other underneath the moonlight. And when they even find out, when they end up finding out that they are their own rivals in their suits, they are not only they're still heartbroken, but they're still willing to but they know that, and even though they know they have to fight one another, they are still looking out for each other and looking to try to make sure, like, if we're going to fight, we're going to do this in the most honorable and direct way possible. We are going to like make sure that we look out for one another, even when their duels are getting interrupted by a bunch of people who want Taro's head. They're still looking out. Blue is still trying to defend himself. Like, no, we need to have our duel. I'm going to look out for you so we can fight together properly. And even after all of their duels, and they end up killing each other, but then coming back to life. Long story. They're still like caring for one another, looking out for each other, and still trying to be like sympathetic for each other. Like, this photo that you saw for the video, it might as well be canon. So And it's just that freaking beautiful with their relationship. They basically do. And you can even notice this with the actor's performance, for Sonoi's performance. Whenever he's talking to anyone else, he's always used like this really deep and serious voice to show like how stern and commanding he is. But whenever he's talking to Momotaro, his voice always kind of like lines up a little bit, and you can tell like he's like relaxing. And it's like really nice and cool and chill. So it's like everyone's in on this. Even during their first duel, the song that's playing in the background is the two actors singing a duet to each other about how beautiful the moon is. So
Yeah.
and while no one gets like that romantic, even the two characters that they do kind of imply in story are kind of romantic by the end. No, these two are the main couple for the entire series, and it's great. And so that is just great. So, and none of them are really like sadistic or awful. They're just, like you said, they're just really eccentric. But we have to make a little caveat for Kijino. So Kijino, 99% of the time, does qualify as this. If anything, when his wife's not involved, he's usually pretty chill or tries to more or less be the calm voice of the group. Although he's a little insecure and not as assertive as the other characters, so he ends up usually getting drowned out. However, when his wife does get involved, this is when we get to see his crazy side, because not only did he turn into a monster multiple times, and even to the point of getting one of the people killed in the well, he didn't get killed, but he did get captured by
The villains.
By the villains at one point because of that. I think they more or less retconned it. We'll get to that later. You can definitely see that he was just going crazy with when it comes to his wife, even to the point that he does almost end up killing Inu brother and Sononi just because of his own obsession with his wife.
Yes, and I think the thing that helps him along to be somewhat to be more sympathetic is that one, that side of him is kind of slowly built into the series. Like they have enough time where he's like a part of the team and like being a good cooperative thing, but also they like show that like his love for his wife, while he is sociopathic about it towards other people, like he is actually like genuinely like good to her and like really cares about her. Like there's a whole episode about like him needing like to make extra money, like get a more job so he can like help his wife or whatever. And we get to slowly see like that kind of get worse and worse for him as well. So it's kind of like his eccentricity is that he really loves his wife. And so like I think that's what keeps him from being hateable, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
because he's kind of, it's more, you just more like pity him when he's like deciding like I'm gonna fucking kill this character, and you're like, okay, buddy, like
take a Snickers and like eat a Snickers, man. You're not you when you're hungry. Come on.
Yeah, which a lot of the characters kind of bring up as he like gets worse and worse. It's like usually you're just like a nice guy, like calm down.
Yeah, to be fair, he is kind of my problematic fave because he does do some what the fuck kind of shit throughout the entire series. And I would honestly say I do need him to get his ass beat at least one or two more times. Not in a sadistic way, but just I need him to really learn that this was a dumb thing for him to be doing in the first place. But he's still great in his own right, even when he is throwing like a little temper tantrum after finding out that his wife is more or less an alien. And ends up having a breakdown and then starts lashing out at other romantic couples. Like he's being such a little bitch, but he's so funny about it in the process. It's just great.
Yeah, like I said, he's more pitiable than like hateable for me, where I'm just like, oh, you dummy, you big idiot. Like cry more. It makes me laugh.
So I think one thing that might be interesting to bring up is, so we were talking about how we'll call them the brain trio for right now. We were talking about how the brain trio initially were the villains more or less, but they ended up slowly shifting over from villains to friendly rivals to basically joining the team by the 40s or so. So I guess the question might become like, okay, so is there like a central conflict? Is there like this big bad they have to deal with? Is there like is there a god like in every other anime they have to take down? No, In fact, one of the things about the production team that they were stressing is that this is not meant to be a giant fight season like every other series. This is meant to be more of a superhero show about a superhero show at a lower level, which is more like a superhero show with a bunch of normal regular people as superheroes. And I think that works here for not having to have. So there's no big bad. At the end of the day, it's just more about stopping people once they end up getting possessed by these spirits and getting them to chill out and just doing that over and over again. They even have what I would consider to be the second best clip show to ever exist. Say, only topped by Community's clip show, which barely counts as one. A clip show of all time where they end up mentioning halfway through, it's like, yeah, our job is never really going to end because people are always going to end up getting taken over by their negative emotions. So we're always going to have to be around to fight and beat these people to make sure that they're not overtaken. To make sure that while they're overtaken, they don't end up killing someone else. So they were even having a whole competition. Like, you know what? Our rival show, our sister show ended up ending. Why don't we end our show here too? Just so we can show we're just as good as them. And they have a whole competition in that episode talk about who is the most valuable player of that entire series. And they just end up all kind of sniping back and forth with each other. Like, no, I'm the best. No, I'm the best. And it's just great. But when it comes to the villains, over the course of the story, they do end up kind of shifting away, but we do end up getting a new brain trio that does end up serving as a villain faction. But by that point, the previous brain trio has now joined the Donbrothers, so they have like a squad of 9 at this point who can just walk through these guys with exceptional ease, even to the point that by the end of the series, that the top 3 can just like knock them all away with just like a couple of hits, and it's great. So there's no like massive god threat here. It's just meant to be more about a bunch of these people who are now become superheroes, just doing what they can to just save a bunch of people from other random people who've been taken over by spirits, and just doing their part to just try to make everyone's life a little bit better. And I love that because like every other series, and I'm guaranteed the season afterward is going to be about them feeling like some big overarching threat, which is fine too. But it's kind of nice that this series decided to go with a bit of a change of pace where it's where it's really more explicitly focused on the characters and how they're working off of one another and coming together to work as a proper team. To properly deal with the actual thread of the story versus smaller thread of the story versus dealing with another god monster, especially since that started getting stretched over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, like I said, this is my first one, so I don't really have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that it was just kind of like an episodic Monster of the Week show. And like it really was just like, no, we're about the characters, and like the kind of overall theme is just learning how to make human connection. And you have that with our main heroes as they all grow closer together. You have that with the villains, like the other trio. And ultimately, like that's kind of how the show ends. Is that being with the Donbrothers is like an important part of enhancing their own lives. So it really is just about like normal people becoming superheroes and just learning that through having to be in a team and all these other things, just learning to appreciate life more. And it's very subtle about that too. Like you don't really feel like that's the message until it happens, and it's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. So I think one thing I do want to talk to you about is the ending, because after the show ended, you really seemed like you were super, like really all gung ho and really loved how the show ended. And I had more mixed thoughts about it in particular. If you're up for talking about that real quick.
Sure, go for it.
So after the original brain trio has now joined the team, the sixth ranger, who was now split into 2 people, who was originally split into 2 people after finding out that all of his friends and everyone in his hometown was either an alien or a figment of his imagination, and having that like come come to realization moment, decides to finally be able to fuse into one person to find comfort within himself. He and everything is starting to like come together and starting to calm down. Momotaro starts losing his memories, apparently because now that the brain trio is no longer is no longer a threat, and now that the Sixth Ranger has now started to step up and become a little bit more competent, Momotaro can now be rested. Now there are there are now for the most part every other character here from the brain trio to the Blue Ranger and the Yellow Ranger, as well as the Sixth Ranger for the most part. I liked how their stories ended. I thought that was a really good way, and I want to talk about Yellow Ranger because there's something really really meta funny about that ending in particular. But I'll get to that. But when it comes to Red, Black, and Pink, I'm not super wild about how the stories ended. So we didn't cover this, but Black's whole thing throughout the entire series was he's been on the run, but like he's been on the run from the cops since before the story started. Because a year before the story began, he was working alongside his wife within an acting troupe. But at one point, the aliens end up coming in and kidnapping and trying to possess a bunch of the people who were part of the acting troupe, including Black. Black was able to get away, but his fiance was ultimately kidnapped and possessed by those people. So he was ultimately blamed for some of those people getting sent into comas, as well as the disappearance of his fiance. So over the past year, he's been trying to figure out what happened, and he's been the one mainly focusing on that set of aliens. His main story has been about dealing with that set of aliens and trying to figure out what's been going on with that. And because of that, he's been exceptionally disconnected from everyone else in the group. Like they don't even red, blue, yellow, pink, and silver, and the Sixth Ranger all end up knowing who each other are, like a couple of episodes after their introductions. But Black doesn't know who the other Rangers are until I believe like episode 42 or so. So he's like completely disconnected from everything else, and it just kind of and it was really just kind of funny to see him constantly like either working alongside the team but not knowing who they are, and leading to all the comedy that we're leading around that. So that was funny. But once they end up finding out and start dealing with all the aliens, they finally end up dealing with him, and he finally ends up getting his fiance back, who was being copied and kept prisoner by those aliens, and the clone was out pretending to be a human and being married to the Pink Ranger. So when all of the aliens are defeated and sent back into their own forest, the human version, his fiance, is back, but for some reason he is now still on the run, even though the cops knew that everything that happened with them previously was because of those aliens. I don't remember. Did they ever explain why he was on the run again?
It's the luck thing. He used all his points to bring that one character back, and now he's like going to be perpetually on the run, basically, as like the punishment for it. Because remember, if you like use your points, you get like major bad luck.
Right, but I thought they would at least explain like why. Okay, so we'll get to that. That's kind of I think that's kind of my problem. So once that ends up happening, and once he ends up getting his wife or his fiance back, he's still on the run. But the fiance decides to break up with him because of that. Now, I'm not saying that she had to stay with him, or she had to be ride or die. It's more that it really felt like just kind of making something bittersweet about his story for the sake of making it bittersweet, because like it's not really anything of his own actions or his own position that really required that to happen in the first place. And
well, it's supposed to be that he's not wanting to talk about it, like all the stuff that happened. Like she keeps going like, you haven't like explained to me like why you're on the run. And so like at first I was kind of on the same page where I'm like, well, it's kind of annoying that he just won't tell her like, hey, like, all right, so some like demons captured you, all this stuff. Like this is what's going on. Or like, you could turn into Inu brother and like prove it to her. Like, that these weirdo things exist, some people can't see them. So to me, that was kind of annoying at first, but then what I was slowly kind of realizing about it is this idea of like, anytime they like show like the backstory stuff with like Natsume or whatever, he really has like a very like idealized version of her, and he very much wants to like preserve that at all costs. And so when she comes back, it kind of makes sense to me that he's just kind of done at that point, because like he's a really good boy for most of the story, but eventually he just kind of like Kijino, who is married to the alternate version of
Natsume.
Natsume. He's just like, I'm gonna turn into a Hinotsuki as many times to find my Miho, and he's like, well, you're gonna be turned into a monster for the rest of your life, dude, because you're not getting her back. Like he just starts kind of being really blunt.
Yeah.
And so what I was seeing in his character was this idea of like this kind of just idea that, and again, it is kind of bittersweet, but kind of just this idea that he's had this for so long and he's gotten what he wants back, and he's so unwilling to like push it in any other direction, to like try to help her understand or do these things. He just kind of wants it to be like, all right, I saved you, we're done, just trust me, just follow me. And by the end of it, she's like, if you're not even going to tell me why you're being fucking chased by the police, there's some random girl who's following you now, and all these other things, she feels like he's like a different person now. And so I was never mad at her, but the thing I was a little concerned with was the idea of like, well, okay, that kind of sucks for Inu brother or whatever. But what I kind of liked about it was just this idea of like, he ultimately did save her and he is happy about that. And whenever she kind of breaks things off with him, he kind of is just like, yeah, that kind of sucks for me, doesn't it? Huh? And eventually it just turns out that he ends up kind of being with the one girl, the other girl. And like the idea is that he's just kind of on the run for the rest of his life. But his kind of talk with Momo Itaru is that he's like, I don't really have anything else, but being a Don brother, and kind of just being finally knowing that you guys were with me this whole time has kind of made me realize that, at least I have that. So to me, I thought the story was kind of about this idea of like having this idealized thing for a whole year. He's looking for this girl. And then by the end, his kind of lack of connection to her, really, like he literally kind of lives off this like fun little saying they do where it's like, oh, I bet you tell that to all the girls. I bet you tell that to all the boys. And so I don't know. I just thought it was kind of this interesting idea of like his idealized idea for her. And she's just like, well, no, you're being weird. You're being shady. You won't tell me these things. And he's like, just trust me. Just believe in me. Like I did all this work. Just go with it. And so I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting. So go ahead. Sorry, I went for a long time.
No, you're good. So here's the thing. I completely want to go with that. I think the reason why I was focusing more on her just like dumping him, because they didn't focus as much on him not expressing herself, even though that was there. The scene that really was meant to kind of like solidify like she was disconnecting from him was like when he was running off, and when he was trying to run away from the cops, and she was just like, no, I don't want to go. I really wish they did focus on more of what you were talking about, because that's probably that I absolutely like. Not only do I believe that, I actually think that's way more justified, because it's like she wants to know what the fuck's, because like I think it's completely fair to her to say, I want to know what the fuck's going on, not just being like dragged around left and right because by the cops because he doesn't want to talk. So
yeah, well, I mean, there are two scenes of that before the one where she freely says like, no, I'm not following you, because there's the one where they're hanging out on the grass and like that cop shows up, and then like the girl shows up and she like helps him, and she's like, well, who's this? Why are we running from the cops? She's like, just trust me, follow me, and he like drags her around, like he's literally like grabbing her hand and dragging her around.
No, but I meant more about her having that negative reaction towards him because of him not talking to her. That's what I was talking about more, because they do establish like because like you said, they do end up establishing that he's not talking to her about that, because not only in the scene that you're talking about when they were on the grass at night, but also when they're in that apartment with each other, and he still won't talk to her about what happened or why he felt like she was dreaming the entire time or any of that kind of stuff. So they do establish that, but it never really seemed like they had her say explicitly like she doesn't want to be with him because he won't talk to her about anything, which is fair. So I'm gonna like, here's the thing, regardless of whether or not that's supported, I'm just gonna go with that because that helps save that part. So
yeah, I think the implication is definitely there, just simply by her body language, or just her simply being like, hey, want to tell me what's going on? Hey, who's this random girl who's very friendly with you and you're not going to also explain her to me? Like, just kind of like very like simple implications like that, where I'm just like, yeah, I'd also be like, what the fuck? Or like he literally goes to Kijino and he's trying to be a good guy about it. This is your wife. She's not real. Get over it. But he's trying to be a nice guy about it. Like, because in his head, he really does think like, I want Kijino to be okay, you know? But that's kind of selfish on his part too, to try to force it. And I think he can understand, like, I think she, in that scene, you can feel the awkwardness of her too, where he's like, hey, Kijino, this is my girlfriend, Natsumi. And she's like, hey, you know, like he's kind of just like, hey, come be a prop for a sec so I can explain to this guy who you are. And so, yeah, I just think there's a lot of scenes where she's very uncomfortable, and that's kind of what it came off to me. But, you know, and maybe those things like, you know, if we went back, maybe there'd be more of them. You know, I haven't rewatched it. So, but yeah, that would be my defense of it. So we can move on to the next part.
Okay, so yeah, so you know what? We're gonna make this even better for you. I want you to try to convince me that these aren't problems, because I'm totally for that. Because I'm totally for just going with that reading, because that makes that part better. But that wasn't my biggest issue. The bigger one was Kijino, because I'm gonna so after it's one thing if she ends up like not wanting to go with Inu brother, especially for how much he just doesn't want to talk about what's going on. And I get the idea, but after that, she ends up, even since she's able to remember all the time that she was being copied as Miho, as Pink's wife, she decides to go to Pink and say like, "Hey, you want to go on a date or something?" Which I'm not against her doing that. My problem is, if there's any character in the series that absolutely needs to be single for a while, it should be Pink. Because Pink's big problem, and the reason why he's been so obsessed about his wife, is because his wife was the only reason that he was like getting any type of self-worth, any type of like value in his life. That's the reason why he was being so possessive and so obsessive about anything that would end up happening to her, because that was the only place he felt like his life had any kind of meaning. So the idea of, so if there was any character, so with that whole realization, which he seemed to have come to by the beginning of episode 50, it feels like of all the characters, it really feels like if there's any proper ending that he needs to be on his own for a little, be on his own and be single for a while, just so you can get a proper idea about who he is and get that proper value, not just trying to date and latch onto someone else, because that's just going to end up feeding into that issue in the first. That's just going to end up feeding back into that issue in the first place. So my whole thing is more for the ending of his storyline. I don't think he should have been with anybody, whether Natsumi had those memories, whether Natsumi had Miho's memories or not. He probably should have stayed on his own for a while. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, so my thing with this is I think the writers definitely wanted to have their cake and eat it too. I think that's very obvious, because they have the scene where he talks to Taro. Taro, in the last episode, he goes around to everyone and he asks them like, "Do you regret the Donbrothers?" And Kijino, which I thought this was, because my big thing as I was talking to you was like, what are they gonna do with Kijino? Is he gonna like die at the end? Because he's like an insane person. Like, if he doesn't get his wife, what is he gonna do? And I kind of really liked that they had a lot of episodes where he's kind of depressed and being a little crybaby. And I liked that the way they kind of went about it at the end was that he decided that he was going to move away and he was going to try to start a new life and just kind of move on and accept that like his life was pretty much a lie. And what I liked about it was the little scene where he talks to Taro and he says like, you know, I've realized that the only thing that really gives me purpose anymore is that I was a Dawn brother. But he's like, but he says it in a way of like, not like he's depressed of like, oh, I have nothing to live for, but more of like, before it was just like Miho, Miho, Miho. But now that that's been stripped away from him, he seems to have fully accepted that. Because even when Miho like or Natsumi is in his house or whatever, like he puts down the wedding photos or whatever, he doesn't want to try to confuse her or make it weird or anything. He like keeps his distance. He's not really like being handsy or weird anymore, or like dragging her around. And so like he seems to have like really like it, like just through the way he acts, he seems very shameful of himself. And so he says to Taro, he says, being a Dawn brother, it's my pride. And he says, I hope it's okay that that is the reason I enjoy being a Dawn brother, is that it's kind of, it's pretty much to him, it's like the only thing left of himself that he can be proud of. That he can kind of believe in about himself, is that he is a hero and he has all these friends that he cares that he does. That I would say that now he understands that like he has a team, because that's kind of the ending episode's point, is like all the characters realizing what they value about having a team. The blue one, Subara, the Oni monkey, or what's his name, Sarahara.
Sarahara.
Yeah, his whole thing I really loved, which is he says, they say, "Do you regret being in the Donbrothers?" I'll wrap this around to Kijino, but he says, "Do you regret being in the Donbrothers?" And his argument is that, or his idea is that, well, you made me appreciate even more so the idea of like a cloud. And he says like, "Oh, the clouds are like these beautiful things, but they're out of my reach and I can't touch them. And even if I could, like they would like evaporate." And the idea I think that they're trying to say is that what he appreciates about being in the Donbrothers is that it actually is something tangible that he can have and hold and have that is himself. Because Sarahara's whole thing is that he's like detached. He doesn't believe in money. He literally like eats invisible food and he can live off that somehow. In some ways, like he can feel like he can literally fake eating noodles and through his imagination feel it, because he's like, I'm detached from this world. Ha ha ha. But in that moment, when he's talking to Taro, he talks about, I think the connection they're trying to make is that he realizes that there is value to having something tangible, like a team, like friends, who he can interact with and talk to all the time, which is really good for his character. So moving that back to Kijino, his thing is that his moment of realization is that, which is that, is it okay that I can still be selfish and say that what I love about the Donbrothers is that it gives me something to kind of admire about myself, and so what I think works about, so that's the cake, and then they want to eat it too. At the end, they have Natsumi come over and be like, the twist is that she remembers literally everything, and not even just like, oh, I was watching myself, but like she has the memories of being Miho. So like her feelings for him seem to have the feelings of like the bestial have seemed to like transplanted over to her in like a subtle way of like, I kind of feel like maybe I would like to get to know you for real this time or whatever, or like I do have all these memories of us together and those seemed really nice. So she's trying to kind of latch on him. So the reason I'm okay with it, even though this one I can more understand being a little more hesitant on, is that I do think that whole scene with Taro made me be like, okay, he did learn, and also he's still very flawed, even in just his way of understanding what being a Donbrother is. So at the very end, but that is what he wants to work towards. And I think what made it work is that when she said, "Would you like to continue the dream together?" He does like have an overtop reaction of dropping the boxes, but he doesn't like run over. It's like Miho-chan, or whatever. Instead, he's just like, okay, sure, come right in. Like his demeanor has changed, and the way he acts and presents himself is different than if I feel like would have been when he was still in the conflict with Tsubasa over her being Miho or her being Natsumi. So it really does feel like just through his body language and how he like reacts to the fact that he's getting Miho back, but he ends up treating it like kind of like really maturely, where he's like, well, okay, like, do you want to talk, or, that kind of stuff. It shows to me, it implies that, okay, going forward, he is going to keep improving himself and he is going to treat this new relationship, I think, better. Because also when he was with Miho, he was like locking her in the house to make sure like she wouldn't be kidnapped or all these other horrible things that were happening to her. So that's an example where I think they had their cake and ate it too. But I think what saved it was mostly just the acting and that one scene with Taro, which I think gave a lot of last minute depth to Kijino. Now, if you think all that's rushed, then that's perfectly fine. But that to me is what solidified it to me as like, no, that was a good like snappy idea of how to round out this character. So okay. What do you think?
I think that's fair. I do think that is fair. And to be clear, I don't think he's going to make like the exact same mistakes. I even think he's learned a little bit more from that. It's just more. It's one of those things where how do I put this?
Would you have just liked like a character have like more permanent consequences as a result of their actions, rather than, I'm guessing what you're going to get to about Taro, where there's like, sorry, Taro, you have to lose everything now. Fuck you.
Well, to be clear, it's not that I don't want consequences. Like, I'm going to be honest, if we're going to get to this. Let's say if they had them like a couple years later get together, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. It's just more, I guess to a certain extent, I guess in terms of time, I would prefer if Kijino spent some more time getting to understand himself a little bit better. Like not in the sense of it being rushed, but more like having a chance to like calm and collect himself and find more about himself to value. Because you're right, I don't think he's gonna make the same mistakes he was making
Miho.
with Miho, like with the alien Miho that he would with this one, but more. It probably would do. I feel like it would probably do him some good if he got some time to just reflect on himself for a little bit before jumping into another relationship, even if he's not immediately jumping into like marrying her. Just
yeah. Whereas to me, what made it work is I thought, oh, the Taro scene is supposed to show that. Whereas I'm guessing what you would have liked is more build up to that, because it is kind of like a switch where it's like he's kind of just being his normal Kijino self for all the episodes, and then in like the final episode, he's like, I've come to this realization. No, I do think there's a little bit of setup for it, obviously, with like I said, when she comes into his house and like he like kind of puts down the pictures or whatever, or even whenever she like hugs him and leaves, he's not just like come back and like chasing her down. He just kind of accepts it, and he's still gonna move out, you know. But I agree with you that I think if they wanted to make it like more justified or like hit harder, they should have had like maybe even like an episode where like he moves away, you know, because they have a ton of episodes and they could have cut one of the episodic ones to do that, you know. Because the show
not the
really
not the Don Killer one. Like that is one that must stay no matter what. That was beautiful. It was the most shit post episode I've ever seen, but it was also it was easily one of the greatest shit post episodes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and yeah, so that's what I would say is that I agree with you that it's a bit rushed, but I just think the scene that they used to rush it was so good that by the end I was like, you know what, I like it. I'll basically the show has built up so much goodwill with me that I was like, you know what, I'll believe you. I think he's better now. I can kind of see what you're going for. So to me, it was just that where I was just like, it's a bit iffy, but I think the heart of it, that scene with Taro was super good. That I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna believe the show that he is moving in a better direction. Even if I think I agree with you, it probably would have been better if they gave more time to it. So
yeah. All right, you got two. Let's see if you can do this one. The Momotaro thing. So by the end of the series, like I said, he is now our Red Ranger has started to lose his memory because now that the villains are no longer villains, the Sixth Ranger is more put together now. They are now starting to retire. He is now done and is now being retired. His memories are being reset, and now he can properly rest. I hate this. I genuinely do because I hate the idea of someone's job. Once you're done with a particular job, whether it's your destiny or not, means that you have to either die or get put into a coffin or just have your entire memory and body reset to body reset and removed everything. And I don't really get the value of doing that in the first place, other than it really made the roll call hit by the end of the episode. But I don't really see why we had to go down that route. Like, what did you think about that?
Yeah, so I think the reason I liked it is so again, a lot of Donbrothers, despite how like silly it is, a lot of things that happen to the characters are just kind of cruel. It's just like Tsubasa just kind of gets fucked, you know, by the bestials. Kijino, sorry, buddy, you're marrying a demon lady. Haruka, you're like constantly being called like a fucking fraud, you know, all these things because of like this point system. Like basically being a hero, they collect these points and they can kind of use them for like Deus Ex Machinas if they need to, but like at the cost of like getting like horrible bad luck. And the idea kind of seems to be that like being a hero, there's a cost, but in this universe, like there's like a literal like cost to it, that you can like build up points or whatever. And they never really explain this point system at all, unless I'm misremembering. Do they?
I don't think so. You keep talking. I'm looking through the site right now. I don't think they ever do, but I'll try to see.
Yeah, they just kind of have this as a thing. Like you collect points, and if you use the points, then you get like horrible bad luck, as like a result of like whatever miracle you want to do. And so the whole idea with like Momo Itaru, and also all of these characters is that like they're just kind of forced to be Donbrothers, Like it's not like they're doing anything exceptional. The glasses just fucking say, "We want you to be a hero now. Fuck you." And like even literally like they'll be out doing things. And then if a Hinotsuki appears, the Dawn Brother gun will just say, "Fuck you, you're going to fight monsters now," and it will teleport them there. And so like a lot of the story has kind of like this underlying element of just like sometimes bad shit happens. And so and especially with like what's the other red guy, the dragon.
That's Jiro.
Yeah, like his life is fucked. Like,
Yes.
and there's not like and again the thing that kind of gets him through it is just simply that he realizes like he needs to stop being a fucking asshole to all these people who are his teammates, and also he kind of learns to accept his like inner demon or whatever. Like the idea is like, well, I've always been here with you. Let's step up and move forward like we always have. And he kind of finds inspiration in like Momo Itaru for his stuff. Then there's also just the fact of like the dude who is like in the little cage, and he's just kind of fucked, I guess, and he has to stay there except for like sometimes when he can leave. And so like to me, it just kind of came across like just another thing of like, oh, Taro is just this big hero guy, and he's done all these great things. But you know what? Now the world is safe, and the Dawn Brother gun says, "Fuck you! You don't get to be in the thing anymore." And they're just like, "That's not fair." Like all the different characters are like, it's basically he's dying. Like as far as like for all intents and purposes, because he's not remembering them. So to me, it just felt like the whole point of the story was just a different way of if in episode 49 he was fatally wounded, and then episode 50 would have been about like all of the connections he's made or like his last minute regrets or thoughts on being a Dawn Brother. Because I think what's kind of interesting is that he asked him like if they have any regrets, and we never really get to find out exactly like if he's asking this because he himself is feeling like he's having regrets. Is he having a moment of just like he's seen how far he's come, because we've learned that he really does care about these people. He's learned to feel like jealousy and like actually like not feel like he's above other people and all that. And so like to me, it just kind of felt like just a death episode, but just through the idea of the basically after defeating so much evil, we don't need you anymore. You've done your part, and get out of here. And everyone's just like, that's not fair. That's not cool. And so he gets to have kind of all these moments where he gets to say goodbye to everyone. And so what I thought was kind of beautiful about it, it also kind of felt like a dementia story. Like there's literally a really nice scene where they're eating Odin together, and these characters all come to him, and they're like, oh, I wish we could have done this, or I wish blah blah blah. And the blue guy Sonoi has to be like, oh, that's this person, they do this. And then he just through the fact that Taro is kind, or he's become very kind, he just offers them all words that they need to hear, even though he doesn't fully understand them. The one that specifically stood out to me was when Kijino is crying or whatever. Because again, that was another reason that felt so good to me, was that he realized how much Taro had helped him, like especially early on in the show. They're kind of paired up a lot, and he helped him get all this money and stuff. So he kind of realized that he was just being a brat. And now he's losing like an actual friend he had who has stuck by him this whole time, even if he's sometimes been an asshole. And so like there's a part where he's like crying, and he's like, oh, that's Kijino, he's timid. And he says like, well, Kijino, he's like, your name means strength, so be strong, you can do it, and so just the whole episode just really felt like just a different way to have a death scene. But the kind of the heart at the end of it is that he leaves them all these really great memories or whatever. But the kind of censure at the very end is that Taro is still himself. He's still going around being a package salesman guy and trying to help people. And at the very end, he says his whole thing is that when he delivers packages, he's like, oh, we've made a connection. So the bittersweet idea is that he left. He died for all intents and purposes. But then at the very end, he meets Haruka again. And he's like, oh, hello, we've made a connection. And then obviously she recognizes who it is. And so the implication to me would be that, he's going to reconnect with them again. Whether he remembers all this stuff, I don't know. But the implication to me seemed to be less of like just like being cruel, and more of just this idea of like through the nature of this world and how this works, they can now regrow a connection again. and kind of that idea of just connections transcending and being really important. So again, to me, it completely worked just because I saw it as just like a death episode, and because the point system and all that stuff has been so unfair the rest of the show and has just kind of fucked us all over. It just kind of made sense to me, or not made sense to me, but it just kind of fit that it's like, what's going to be the dramatic stakes? Because our final villain, like you said, is like not some big bad guy. It's just two assholes who work for the demon cult or whatever, who literally show up for this episode and we kick their ass.
Yes.
And so, like, I just felt like, oh yeah, life goes on, and we don't, sometimes people die or people move on or people move away. And then yeah, like I said at the very end, it seems like not too much time has passed. All these characters kind of get their final moment where it seems like they've learned something or they've grown, and it seems like now they can maybe reform a new connection with him again. So to me, it was bittersweet in like a high concept way that I thought was just interesting and had enough heart to it that I thought like that's why I enjoyed it, was that it was so like unorthodox, it was so weird. I couldn't entirely tell like what's the message, but I could understand that the heart of it was Taro is basically dying. And how do these characters react to the fact that this person who's been in their life this whole time and changed them for the better, he's leaving. So yeah, so that's kind of why I liked it. And the reason I accepted it was just that the show has just kind of always had random moments, usually for comedy, but now it's coming in for a serious thing of just the guns just fuck our heroes over. The Dawn Brother thing kind of sucks, and it just kind of screws us over in this weird point system that they never explain.
Right.
So
Well, okay.
that's kind of why I liked it. So sorry, I went on forever.
No, it's cool. As far as I can tell, I'm going through the point system for the point system page. As far as I can tell, it has nothing to do with this. It's really just kind of something with their overall system. But that's kind of my thing where I'm like, I don't really get why this rule even needs to be here, other than, well, there are two, other than just for this ending, but there are two reasons why I'm not wild about it.
Yeah.
One, in contrast to every other conflict that the characters have dealt with, like even besides the fact that they were all for comedic purposes, the other reason why I didn't mind why they were okay with them is because the whole idea is that we're looking to see how they deal with these problems, how they overcome them. But there's no way for to really like show how Momotaro ultimately deals with the system in the first place. Like, it's funny that you actually bring up the point system, because I actually thought this would have been a really interesting way to see how this was done. Because what ends up happening to everyone as they end up joining the system is when they end up becoming marked as a Dawn Brother, they usually end up getting something really tragic or sad is happening to them in the process. This is we see this most explicitly with Yellow and Black. Like, this is around the same time Black ends up getting marked as wanted by the cops, and this is when Yellow ends up getting marked as a plagiarist has her own work. But the whole idea is that we're putting these characters on these journeys to see how they end up overcoming and dealing with these issues in the first place. What I would have really liked is that the whole reason that these tragedies end up happening to them in the first place, and why this point system is so weird, is because it ultimately is taking the luck from the character, or from these characters, the luck, the goodwill of the universe from these four characters, and giving it to Momotaro. Like, that's the reason why he's able to function and work so well. So the whole idea is that by the end of the series, he doesn't necessarily have to kill himself, but he doesn't necessarily kill himself or lose his memories. But at the end of the series, he ends up wiping out that point system. At the bare minimum, he's making himself back to normal so that his other friends can go off and live their lives, without having to be wanted by the cops, or being marked as a plagiarist, or being cursed to turn to a monster.
So basically, you wish it would have actually been like a sacrifice, basically, rather than just like a bad thing happens to him and sorry, he's just dying now, basically, effectively.
Right. Because especially like, we're at the last episode, you can't really have like something really that major, like something major enough for an ending. To especially Red, who's basically perfect in most ways. You can't just throw in something like that. It would probably be better if you use something that's been set up throughout the course of the entire series, rather than just coming up with something random. And I'd rather it not necessarily have to be a sacrifice, but more in the sense of it's relying on rules and situations that have already been set up, rather than just coming up with this rule of, okay, he has to lose his memories now because we're just done at this point. Because it just feels like we're doing that rule just for the sake of getting a bittersweet ending.
Yeah, I kind of. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, finish. Go ahead.
No, I'm finished basically. Go for it.
Yeah, Yeah, I was gonna say, I think again, I think the other reason it kind of worked for me was simply that that's kind of just like they're again, they have all these mysterious figures like the guy in the cage, the bestials, and like the connections to like the Dawn clan. So to me, I think what also made it work is that like he's so perfect, and it's a lot of it is because of like one, who he is, but two, like obviously he's like this Dawn clan person, and he like takes he like multiple times in the story he'll just like do bullshit, like he'll just do anything, you know, he'll like the bestial thing where he's like, well, this is my responsibility, and he just like eats the little origami or whatever. And then like he has enough willpower with like a little bit of help to like basically just like control it and like do all these other things just because he's fucking perfect and he's awesome, you know. That's the idea. um but like the whole kind of idea around him seems to be that like he is kind of a pawn like to all these like higher powers and like these weird things. Like he's the last of the Dawn clan, he's got to do all these things, he's the one who has to do the big finishing moves, he's got the special whatever. And so I don't know. I think and like also like his whole thing is about like a big party and all this stuff. Like when he comes into battle and he's all hyped up or whatever. So I really do just think that the idea was supposed to be that like in the same way that a lot of these characters are just kind of living their lives, that I do think it was just meant to be that like sometimes life fucks you over. And Taro was kind of used a lot of the time by everything, and he served his role, he served his purpose. Now we got to get rid of him. And I don't know, like I think why it worked for me was that I liked all the other characters enough that I thought the idea of them also like being like they like none of them are okay with this, or none of them think this is normal. They're like, that's fucking stupid. Why is this happening? And I don't know. I thought that, along with the fact that the episode right before it had built up to it, where he first asks or he's like talking to Dragon Boy. And he like talks to him, and he kind of compliments him and stuff. They're like, "Are you okay? You're acting like weird." And he's like, "Am I?" And so I don't know. I thought the actor also just did a great job of like selling.
Oh yeah, no. To be clear, when it comes to that episode, all three of the plot points, they were, even with my own issues with them, they were executed as great as they possibly could be. Like when it comes to the acting, when it comes to the direction, when it comes to everything, when it comes to the music, everything was carried exceptionally well. It was just those core ideas I was not well about.
Yeah, for sure. But, yeah, and I just think I just simply like the core, or just like the idea of just bad things happen, and sorry, Momotaro, I guess you're just dying now. And everyone's just like, that's so sudden. What? And so I don't know. I just thought I thought that made sense for the show. Even if I can't fully explain it, regardless of even if like if I were to think about it more and be like, no, that's kind of bullshit. I do think it brute forces its way through it with the acting, and kind of just sells it on that level. And again, I think the ending, being kind of bittersweet and like they see each other again, but obviously they don't tell you what happens afterwards, kind of allows you in your head to kind of be like, oh, maybe they do reconnect in some way. But I don't know. I just oh, go ahead.
See, this is where we get to the second issue, because the first issue is just more. My whole thing is, if you're going to have tragedy in your story, I think it works better when you're using the rules that have already been set up instead of just like introducing a new rule for it. That's one of my issues when it comes to tragedy. But there's second, yeah. So
or just, or just like random chance.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the second issue, the other reason why I don't like this is, do you know about the movie?
I do not.
So yeah, there's going to be an epilogue movie where this series gets to cross over with the previous one, and Momotaro is going to get his memories back.
Oh.
So I'm like, what's the point of this if this is just going to be canon and we're just going to bring him back to where it was? And this is meant to take place, and the movie is meant to take place a year after the show ends. So
yeah, okay. Well, here's the thing then. So with that context, then I like kind of fully agree with you. If the show, but like fuck the movie, then I ain't watching that shit. Because I liked the sudden, like, this is like kind of how life is. Sometimes bad things happen. You just kind of got to deal with it. I liked that enough that fuck the movie, I ain't watching that. So like the shit. Because yeah, no, then at that point it's just like, oh, let's hit like some contrived plot point. Whereas I felt like it was sudden enough in like a human way, of like a very like watching these characters watch as just their friend is like kind of dying right in front of their eyes. or getting dementia or whatever you want to attribute to it. But yeah, if they're just gonna undo that or like make it like, to me, I think the reason it worked was it's the last episode and they kind of it felt metaphorical and like abstract enough that I really liked it. But if they're gonna actually make like a quest out of it, or like we got to work to get the like, that's why I didn't. That's why I was okay with like the system not like the point system not being a part of it. Is I kind of liked how random it was. Just like, this is just happening. You're dying. You know, again, he's not dying, but you know, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they're gonna try to like, so basically, like, I liked it on the level of like, okay, you're being artsy, show. I like it. I'll vibe with you. But if they're gonna like try to make it concrete, then fuck it. I ain't watching that movie. Bullshit. Because now you're ruining it. Now you're making it like now you're not working on like an abstract level. Now you're actually making it like, yes, this was like a thing we could solve, and this is like something that like there's like a rhyme and reason to it, and we can work within that or whatever. Fuck you. So
And this is the other reason why, and as a Sentai fan, this is also the reason why I wasn't super wild about this, because especially with how popular this show is. Oh, actually, rewind. So in Sentai, they bring back past actors all the fucking time. Like, you remember that that One Piece Power Ranger show I told you about?
Yeah.
Yeah, the show ended back in 2012, and that entire cast has shown up at least 10 different times after that, if not in specials, in other episodes, or in other crossover movies. And I know with how popular this show is going to get that treatment too. So these guys are going to end up having to come back these guys are going to end up coming back at some point, if not for a crossover film with this past team, but also with the team's going to come afterward. I wouldn't be surprised if they do another epilogue film. These guys are going to end up showing up again. So I always go in knowing with almost every Sentai, they're not going to die. They are never going to die. And if they're going to die, hell is going to have a revolving door, and they're still going to show up over again. Like the last time a Ranger died was back in Go Busters, and that's where the Gold Ranger ended up sacrificing himself so Red wouldn't be more or less basically destiny bonded to the villain of that series. And he has and even though he died at the end of that show, he has shown up in every crossover film after that. So it just kind of makes me go like, why are we doing either? Oh yeah, there's another
cheap.
Yeah, it's cheap. So I'm like, guys, I know you're going to do crossover. Like, the only team that's not gone a crossover film after the show ended was the furry team, and the only reason they haven't done that, the team hasn't come back in total, is because Green ended up running over an old lady with his bike at one point and ended up going to jail. But even then, Red and the Red Ranger of that season and the Sixth Ranger of that season have shown up multiple times in other works afterwards. So I'm just kind of going like, guys, I know they're going to end up doing cameos again, and I know we're going to end up bringing back Momotaro. Just bring them back. Let's just bring them back. So let's but no, sorry, not just bring them back. So let's not even play around with the idea of them dying, because I know that the show's that they're going to end up bringing the characters back at one point or another. So let's just not even play around with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I would say I absolutely agree with you. Bad move, but I won't watch the movie, so I'll be safe. But as a standalone, or just like I'll just consider it its own separate thing. Because yeah, as an ending to the show, then I really like it. Like, if I count like everything afterwards as like it's a continuous story, then like, yeah, it's stupid, and that's like kind of gives it like a bad taste in your mouth, because it's just like, but why? Like, what's your problem?
Yeah, no, that's fair. And to be clear, other Versus series aren't really canon, but the chance of this one being canon are high, because the writer for this series who wrote every episode for the show is going to also be co-writing the movie. So this is most likely still going to be canon. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, if we're just considering this as a standalone TV show, and knowing the fact that like a lot of the rules aren't really well defined, yeah, it totally makes sense. But when I'm considering the fact of this is a part of a major franchise and they love bringing actors back over and over and over again, yeah, no, this is a bad move, guys. Like even with Donbrothers, they had two different crossover specials where they were working with past teams. Once with the one of the past ninja teams, and another one with the past dinosaur teams, which are both celebrating their 20th anniversaries. So, like, guys, we're gonna do this again. Why? Like, come on. Um,
Yeah.
so that's the reason why I was
Basically, like, this is the equivalent of if, like, you were like, bro, you got to watch like the Frieza arc. It's like, okay, what? It's from the show called Dragon Ball Z. Don't worry, like it's kind of a standalone arc. And I watch it, I'm like, whoa, when they killed like this character and that character, that like really got me. And you're like, no, it's really bad and bullshit. They just bring him back. And I'm like, what? No.
yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
I'm not used to the tropes. I don't know. I'm not in the know.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I figured when you were defending this, like, you don't know about the movie yet, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a risk that they might, I will let you know about that. But let's just say the crossover film is going to be with the past team, and Zenkaiger is going to be showing up again. So we'll see how that ends up going. So yeah, that's how everything with that's going to go. But to talk about a couple things with the background for the show. First off, the show had the production team decided to make a TikTok account with this TikTok account, and it has been glorious because all the actors just love being as like silly and hammy as possible on it, and it has been great to seeing them all like interacting with each other, just doing weird Japanese memes with those videos. It's just been like hilarious.
Yeah, they're clearly having fun.
Yes. Also, the head writer for the series is named Toshiki Inoue. I don't know if you've ever seen. Have you ever seen pictures of him?
I don't think so.
So, Toshiki Inoue is a notorious writer within tokusatsu circles. He's mainly been working on Kamen Rider shows, but for Sentai, he's also known for writing. He's written one show in its entirety called Jetman, and he's had a huge impact on the entire franchise. Like, he's even been the reason why two also fan favorite writers have come back to the show, have written for the show multiple times, and he was like their senpai to bring them into the franchise. So he's he's more or less like, I don't want to say the godfather, but more like a major part of what makes Sentai. And it's been kind of just crazy to see, like, oh, I never got around to seeing Jetman, but it's kind of curious to see what his work is like here. It's like, oh my god, this is like, even with my quote unquote problems with the ending, which even before this, I'm like, I still for the most part like how it ended. It was just those three things I wasn't wild about, but I'm like, I need this energy in my life. I want to be able to write this kind of insanity and still make it just come off like both wholesome and funny. Because I'm just like, because it is just beautiful to like see like that one episode where when Momotaro is delivering a package to a woman and she confuses him for her son. Since in the show he can't lie without the risk of dying, his friends are like, you know what? But he still wants to make this woman happy. His friends decide, like, you know what? We'll help you. We'll go ahead and like attach a microphone and a speaker to you, and we'll speak through you. And just the insanity of seeing them trying to puppet him as they're helping him go hang out with this old woman and trying to help her reconnect with the idea of her son. It is just hilarious, and I fucking love every minute of it, especially when it comes to her constantly sniping back and calling out the main characters on their bullshit. It is just great. I'm like, I want that energy in my life, you know?
Oh yeah, the show just has a great charisma to it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And I bring up Toshiki Inoue because if you ever look up pictures of him, he looks like he's a member of the Yakuza. And it is great because he just has because he's like 60, but he's like has like this huge scowl, and like you'll see it like in one picture he just has like this cigarette in his hand, just looking as cool as fuck. Another one where he just has like a knife and he's just holding it up to his face like he's about to lick it. Another one where he's just holding a giant raw fish in his hand. He's just like he's about to bite. I'm like, I want to be this cool when I'm his age, because I'm just like, he's known for writing kid shows, but he still looks like a fucking boss, and I'm just like, yes. uh, so yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to try to talk about in particular. Lastly, I brought this up since I set this up. I want to talk about this. I originally, like I said at the beginning, I was a huge fan of Power Rangers growing up, and I kind of just fell out of it mostly because it started to because it was right around when it started going over to Disney. Disney was really ashamed of having the property, so they never showed it at a proper time on broadcast TV. So you could only really watch it properly on. You can only properly watch it on cable. I didn't have cable growing up, so I kind of just fell out of it. However, when I keep trying to jump back into the show, and it is painful, not only because the directors tell the actors to act as wooden and stiff as possible, but when I finally sat down and decided to watch the newest episode, one episode from the newest show, it was painful. And I bring this up because it's trying to do something similar to Donbrothers, where it's more of a sitcom with action elements occasionally, but it's so sloppy with its execution. Like when it comes to that episode where they are puppeting Momotaro as he is trying to help out this old woman, they still make sure that they tie in the action properly, not only in terms of the monster of that episode being the woman's son, but also making sure the characters, when they had their own emotional problems from the previous moments of the episodes, they're still flowing through and end up interacting with what's going on in the episode proper, or within that fight scene, and it still works. And that's one of the less integrated episodes. But in Dino Fury, it was just maddening because they decide because they end up really trying to work backwards to try to how do I put this? Basically, they don't know how to fuse those elements properly where they both are trying to be a sitcom and an action series. The episode I watched was about how the characters, Red and Pink, ended up getting body swapped. But the whole point of the episode is that Pink is trying to help her dad go on a date with a woman, but she needs to learn that she shouldn't try to force someone to be who they're not on a date, which as a moral on its own sounds fine, but it kind of falls flat when the whole idea was to hey, when all Pink wanted to do was just hey, could you wear a suit to this date instead of just wearing overalls and stuff, make a good impression. But they're trying to punish her for that, but trying to say that's wrong for her to do that, which no. And then what makes it even weirder is that the whole body swapping stuff and everything around the date has nothing to do with the premise. All the body swaps, the monster has body swapping powers, but we don't really gain anything from the characters getting body swaps. So I don't even know why they did it. And nothing about the date or the body swapping have anything to do with them beating the monster in the first place. So it just kind of makes me go they took an episode from Rhea Soldier that was already kind of weak on its own and just made it worse. And I'm just kind of frustrated with how shit it is. And I bring this up in particular because I'm doing this video because I do want people to go check out Donbrothers. I know we kind of spoiled it here, but seriously, go watch it. We did not cover everything. It is great. But I know the best place for people to find out about this and to engage with the story is if it did get adapted properly into Power Rangers. But I don't trust them to do it properly because Rhea Soldier was not a good show, but they found a way to but every single time they even take on even a mediocre show, they consistently make it worse. And I don't really care what Linkara says because more often than not, even though he tries doing those long videos talking about how, oh, the show isn't that bad, or oh, the show is just really fun and quirky, it always comes off like he's making excuses, and I can't take him seriously on any of the points that he makes with the show, even especially not only after watching it, but even in terms of what he ends up saying in that video. It's almost like he's making excuses. One point he was talking about how, oh, Black Scare Dark is how he needs to figure out what he wants to do in life. Because there's this one episode where he had to gain music, where he had to figure out what he wants to be a musician, but he needs to figure out what music instrument that he needs to play. And Then he does, but then another episode, he ends up playing like a bunch of different instruments, and I'm like, okay, what the fuck does this have to do with beating up monsters in rubber suits? What the fuck does this have to do with anything with the action part of the show? So I'm like, and to be clear, the Sentai that Dino Fury is based off of had nothing to do with that. So I have no. So it's like they take a premise that was already kind of half baked in the first place, but then make it more convoluted and still get their morals wrong half the fucking time, which just makes me go like, I want them to be good. Sentai still puts out good shit. I want Power Rangers to be able to match it, if not improve on it. But it seems like they're so dedicated to still write a show like it's in the fucking 90s, or to write the show like they're writing a Nickelodeon sitcom for toddlers. I don't really know what it was. It really just comes off really disappointing, because I would love the show to be great, but it just chooses to be, I don't want to say mediocre. It just chooses to be like, it just chooses to write itself like it's for Nick Jr., if that makes any sense. And
Yeah,
still
for sure.
shit about doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry for that little rant. I just don't know if I was ever going to make a video off of that, because I watched two episodes of Dino Fury. I refused to watch the rest of that show. That was not something I want, and I don't feel like I'm going to ever. I don't want to make a video or like a podcast or a video essay off of that, because like I'm not dedicated. I'm not what I have punished myself with Ruby. I am never going to punish myself with Ruby and with IDW Sonic. I am not watching something I know is shit anymore. So. No, so that's my little rant on Power Rangers. Power Rangers is shit. Power Rangers is choosing to be shit right now. I don't want them to be. I'll leave it at that.
Awesome.
So, do you have any closing thoughts?
Not really. I would say, I guess I would say that this is a great show, I think, to get someone into Sentai, because I think it's the type of thing where, like, yeah, like as soon as I finished it, I was like, you know what? Maybe I want to watch a different show, see like how it compares and contrasts to it. So, yeah, I definitely think that Donbrothers is just a great kind of gateway show for it. And yeah, no, I would just highly recommend it. It's just super fun.
Completely.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Please go check it out. And for any other recommendations for other Sentai series, I've watched like the last decade and a half or so of other shows. The ones that I found to be the most fun. Now, the characters aren't going to be as insane as this, but Gokaiger, that's the Pyre season, Kaiser Sentai Gokaiger, that one's really great. They're not as eccentric as this, but they are relatively up there. Lupin Ranger versus Papa Ranger is also one of my own personal favorites too. It has its own couple of growing pains in the middle, but I actually do think it's like a really fun show to check out if you're really up for it. And maybe Tokyuger. That's the train one. And if you've seen it before, yes, it is the one with the robot that has a trained penis. So
awesome.
So if that's something that you're interested in, go check that one out. I believe that is episode. Hold on, let me just double check, because I want to make sure I get this properly. That is, yes, episode 3. So if you're ever interested in figuring out, want to see what that is near the end of episode 3. Go check that out. So yeah, Donbrothers is amazing, and I am looking forward to the newest season that's going to have 5 Momotaros.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right, perfect. So we'll go ahead and wrap this episode of LaviCast to a close. And thank you very much, Waffles, for joining me on this wonderful experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun, and thanks for suggesting it to me in the first place.
No problem. All right, have a nice night, you guys.
Peace.